take it out on the
Who is it?
So grease up your baby for the ball on the hill. And polish them rockets now and swallow those pills and say, oh.
What?
What is going on, everybody? Look at this. It finally happened. We told you it was going to happen, so we're going to go over... actually going to make two videos tonight. You're not going to get to see the other one until probably a day or so from now, which is going to be some Strike Force predictions. That'll be up as well. But we're going to be talking about a pretty interesting subject. We were, debating on a topic that we were going to talk about, specifically with... I know I had to
I'm going to try and get a really, I don't know, professional pose here. I don't know what this is. What do you do? My couch is like quicksand. You just kind of like start, sinking into it.
We were trying to figure out how to make this couch work, but I think we're going to be okay. I think it's going to be all right. But one of the topics we came up with was talking about the prototypical mixed martial artist. And, it is a really good subject. Casey brought it up and said, we should talk about this because I have a fear that we're going to get away from guys that have, a specialized,
skill set or, some kind of, just unique creativity that I feel, a little bit, and I don't say it's going to happen. I'm a little bit skittish it could.
And I understand where he's coming from. And we kind of have differing opinions on this. We haven't really talked about it in depth, which is a good thing. It's going to, give some good discussion for the video. But what's one of the things that you really are fearful of with that?
Well, let's explain a little bit on what is, more explanation of the prototypical mixed martial arts fighter. When MMA began, you had what? Excuse me. Oh, I had like terrible ingestion for a moment. That was terrible. Totally taking out my helmet. Stand-up fighter and ground fighter, correct? You got a judo guy and then, karate guy, right? From there, you kind of had dudes that were kind of mixing stuff. Like, well, maybe it was like a wrestler, boxing, or you had like, we'll say, Marcos Ruas, King of the Streets, Muay Thai, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? So you had guys that were good at two different things. And now everyone is pretty much good at everything. But it wasn't like you were training in Muay Thai, and then you trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kind of like maybe, say Vanderlei Silva did that. Let's say Nogueira, he did amateur boxing, Big Nog, I should specify, and then he did Jiu-Jitsu. So now, if let's say Chase and I want to do mixed martial arts, say, hey, I want to be a fighter, I want to go to the UFC, I can go down to my American top team, or my jungle owned by Tom Lawler and Seth Petrozelli, and I can train in not just a bunch of independent things, and they are broken up, by class. You have striking and then ground, but you're learning like a streamlined version of MMA. You know what you need to have to be successful now. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So,
and that bothers you because you don't have guys like, you kind of mentioned it, like Lyoto Machida that's good in one specific skill set, which is karate.
And that's interesting. I think that's exciting. But you have, I worry that you're just going to have guys like, and when I say this, it's not about, like, you did a video on super wrestlers not too long ago. What?
Notice the context, the pre-context that's thrown in there.
Right.
You did a video, so now I'm just going to go ahead and... all right, go ahead.
Like, I'm thinking of, like, a Gray Maynard or Bader. What's his name?
You're talking about Ryan Bader's an example, and then like a...
Gray Maynard, like a boxer-wrestler, more or less. Rashad Evans. All these guys are very similar in that they just use their, I wouldn't say limited, but, boxing experience to set up the wrestling, more or less, You have guys that are also similar that use wrestling and primarily their hands, but they're more creative like John Jones. He does all kinds of crazy stuff.
That's true.
But my worry is that when we're kind of like, we're almost
Ben
farming.
Askren.
Ben Askren, exactly.
Ben Askren's an example of that.
Exactly. I think we're kind of farming mixed martial arts fighters now. Does that make sense? Where it's like you just go in there, you learn. Here's your curriculum and your criteria. You got to have clinch. You got to have takedowns. You got to have ground. You got to have striking. You're done. And then it kind of gives you the most Muay Thai, submission grappling, and Greco-Roman.
So that bothers you then?
A little bit, because it's just everyone's going to be similar. Does that make kind of sense? If we're all learning the streamlined stuff, you're not going to have a Lyoto that did karate sumo, and then 2 different types of jiu-jitsu.
Well, you know, and I see where you're coming from on this, but, you know, one thing, number one, that I think that, I won't say necessarily you're overlooking it, but you're always going to have guys that have a base. It doesn't matter, you know, when you look at mixed martial arts, there's always going to be someone like a George St. Pierre. You know, people don't want to admit it, but the guy is probably the most talented wrestler in mixed martial arts. He came from a, you know,
Kyokushin karate base.
Kyokushin karate background. That was his base.
Yeah.
Now look at him now. He's turned into one of the most prolific wrestlers when it comes to mixed martial arts, not necessarily when it comes to wrestling.
We put a singlet and headgear on him. You know, it's a different story.
We could have a different situation, but there's always going to be a base, so that doesn't bother me so much. And I see what you're saying, but you're always going to have unique guys. I don't think that's ever going to change. I think we are starting to see a trend though of where guys are saying, you know what, I can't just get by anymore with 2 skill sets. I've got to have 3. I've got to have 4. I've got to have 5. I mean, that's an evolution of a sport. Look at, whoa.
Just, you reeling in just a little bit?
No, I thought I did a little bit of an accidental spray here.
I think I'm all right. I didn't feel anything.
Right.
We'll let it pass.
That just did not happen. So anyways, you see it in football. I mean, the evolution of football. Look at it back in the 40s to now. Look at the difference. I mean, you're going to have that with a sport. That's just, it's going to happen. I don't think there's really anything that we can do about it. We can be kind of, you know, bothersome about it, that, hey, you know, this is something that I'm not necessarily comfortable with. But I think that the biggest thing is that, number one, guys are always going to come from a base. I don't think that's ever going to be a problem or a challenge. You're always going to have a guy that comes from a solid base. He's going to end up using that base to end up being better. John Jones is a perfect example of that. The guy is probably one of the most talented, you know, up-and-coming prospects in the UFC. He ends up being, you know, at this point he is undefeated. He hasn't...
Well, I mean, you know, you can kind of count that loss to DQ loss to Matt Hamill.
I was going to say, that's what I was trying to say, was the Matt Hamill loss. But, you know, the thing is with this guy, look at what he's able to do. He mixes his wrestling in and then adds other things. He adds Muay Thai into it. He adds the boxing starting to come along and look a little bit better. So I really don't think that's going to be a problem. I see where you're coming from.
Right. I honestly don't really buy into my own theory that much, just based on human creativity. You know, like using John Jones again, when he didn't have a striking coach at whatever gym that he's training at in New York, he would just watch kung fu movies and try things out on the heavy bag and pads. So I think general human creativity will keep that from happening, but it does kind of make you wonder a little bit, you know, like, are we just going to have a bunch of guys that are just streamlined like that?
Well, and you're afraid of a cookie cutter.
Exactly.
And that's understandable, but again, I really don't think that that's going to be a problem. I think you're always going to have guys that are always going to be unique. You got Vanderlei Silva, for God's sakes. That yeah, he probably still, you know, people are questioning why is he still fighting, but there's always going to be guys that are crazy, that are, you know, nutcases.
We can only hope.
You know, that we enjoy. Charles Crazy Horse Bennett, who we
Yes.
got to gladly enjoy at the World Extreme Fighting event.
Indeed. And just to be, you know, he is going by Kid Chaos now.
Kid Chaos.
Yeah.
As the guy liked to announce. He didn't even get it right at first. He was like, Kitty. I was like, Kitty.
Candyland.
I was questioning what he was trying to get at, but you know, I don't really think it's going to be a problem. I think when you look at it, guys always are going to come from a streamlined base. They're going to end up evolving. There's nothing really you're going to be able to do about that, because here's the thing. A guy's going to come along and he's going to find an advantage. And when he finds an advantage, he's going to exploit it. And then what are you going to do? You're going to come along and try to deny that advantage. That's just, that's sports, man.
That's evolution.
It's evolution of sports. Wow. Yeah.
That was deep there. Dude.
That was philosophical, wasn't it?
It was. I like that.
I just made this kid, his jaw drop for about 2 seconds.
It
I thought
did.
it was Socrates.
Saw like a toga and everything. Like, he just dropped some knowledge on me.
So I think this was a good topic. You know what? Let's hear what you guys think. What do you think about this? Is prototypical mixed martial artist, is it going to be a problem? Is it going to hurt the sport? Is it going to make the sport better? Or do you just not care? I don't know if you know, it's necessarily a thing that really is bothering people.
Right. Or I'm just you know, example. If you train in MMA, let's say you go to an academy in your area, do you feel like you fit into that prototypical mold? And if so, you know, what do you think about that? And if not, how are you different?
Good point. Well, sir, this was a good video. Let us know what you think. Leave some comments, constructive, negative, positive, as always. HeroCasey versus PhantomUFCfan. We got a Strikeforce video coming up. It'll be out, like I said, a few days.
Yep.
Look for that. We'll be recording it in just 3 minutes.
Exciting.
Take it easy, guys.
my friend Cassandra, Jessica, wanna play ball.